Near mint condition, the home of collected editions.
That cover's so awesome.
Absolute format is the best way to own this store. Time to empty those wallets and fill those shelves. How's it going, all you minties? Uncanny Omar here from Near Mint Condition, the home of collected editions. And it is my absolute pleasure to get to talk about one of my favorite comics. That's right, the Smurfs are back, and we are going to be looking at the Smurfs Archives, Volume 1 from Papercutz Publishing. So let's go ahead and get started. And welcome back, everybody. Now, before going any further, a big thank you to the folks at Papercutz and, of course, Mad Cave for sending us a copy of this new archive edition. And this book is already out in the direct market and book market. And oh my gosh, I have been so excited when I found out that Papercutz was going to not only reprint, but make the Smurfs comics bigger and also in the chronological order of releases. They have previously released the anthology editions, and you can see just how much smaller this is. These were supposed to be in chronological order, however, even in the first one, the first appearance of the Smurfs doesn't happen until the very end. So that's where you get the Magic Flute story with Johann and Peyo. But in here, we're going to be looking at exactly how this is mapped. And unfortunately, these were discontinued. There were only 5 of these. Volumes 2 and 3 have already been solicited of this coming this year, so I'm super excited for it. So here we have this piece by Peyo. Of course, it's very, very reminiscent of the designs that they use here. But it is just a Smurf on a frog. Smurfs Archives, Volume 1, the Papercutz logo. Now, if you don't have the anthologies, to kind of give you an idea of how big this book is. Here it is compared to the size of an omnibus, so you can just see how much taller and longer it is. And then, of course, looking at the spine here. So you can get a better idea of just how much taller it is. But while we have it on its spine, here we go. Peyo, the Smurfs Archives, Papa Smurf down there, the Papercutz logo, Volume 1. Love that. The iconic Smurf village back here, which we really don't see until they get their own spin-off series, but I'll talk more about the history of that here in a little bit. Brainy Smurf down there reading some kind of ridiculous magic book, I'm sure, to make life easier for the Smurfs, but truly, that never happens. I love the Smurf down there pointing at Papercutz. Love just the design of this. And here's all the stories collected in this book, and again, in chronological order. And I think for the first time, and please correct me if I'm wrong, like we're getting some mini comics here in America. All right, no dust jacket. It is just art on board, and it does have like a glossy finish to it. Now, I am going to open this book up. I'm going to give you a brief history of the Smurfs, the creator, and then, of course, look at this beautiful, wonderful comics in here that I'm so happy I get to talk about. I don't think I've had a chance to talk about these on my channel. Maybe in my haul videos, you might have seen one of the original anthologies make it, but now I get to talk about the Archives Volume 1. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at the book here. We have your end sheets, this beautiful pattern here, same as in the back. And opening it up, the Smurfs Archives, Volume 1, Papercutz logo, and broken down into different chapters and what page you're going to find the chapter. The folks behind Papercutz, and then a little bit about the Smurfs here. The stories respect the artwork and writing as originally created per the wishes of the authors and their publishers. However, they may contain outdated cultural depictions, which I actually talk a little bit about because for the first time we have the story that will later become the Purple Smurf. Matt Murray returns as your Smurfologist. He was the gentleman that did a lot of the introductions in the original anthologies, and now he's back with a brand new introduction here in the archives. And a little bit about the man himself, Pierre Culliford. And of course, I am butchering that name, but otherwise known as Peyo, and how he went from being a film projectionist in Nazi-occupied Belgium to working in an animation studio and then drawing comics. And starting with, of course, Johann and Peewit. And that will forever change the world. Because within this comic is when we are introduced to a group of little blue gnomes, I think is the way that he described them, known as Les Shrubmums, something like that. I can't remember. All I know is growing up, I knew them as Los Pitufos. So in here, in the very first story, there's not a lot of Smurfs. You see the main character of Johann and Peewit, who are, well, Johann at least is the page to the king. Peewit is more like I always thought it was Pee-wee when I was growing up, but he is more like the Joker. Now, not the Joker like the guy in Batman, like the jester, if you will. So he ends up finding a flute from this traveling salesman. And this flute, Peewit finds out that no matter how long he plays it, people will dance to it until they get tired enough that they pass out. So it's a magic flute. So the very first story here, collected, is called The Smurfs and the Magic Flute. That's what it's known as throughout the world. But the original title, and you'll find all this stuff out, by the way, reading the history and, like I said, in the introduction or in between chapters, it was originally called The Flute with the Six Holes or something like that, and then it was later on named The Flute with the Six Smurfs. I think they changed one of the names out. But depending on the popularity and how much it grew of the Smurfs, that's when they started changing the title. So they started off in this comic book right here of Johann and Peewit. Now, what ends up happening with this flute is that this villain named Oily Creep ends up taking it and starts making people tired so he can rob them. So the duo decides to go out and seek out this gentleman right here. This is the wizard known as Homnibus. That's right, with an H. This guy right here. And he tells them about this secret, sacred world, like this place where they might be able to find a solution for the flute, because the flute came from this magical realm right here, these lands where the Smurfs live. And that's where they end up meeting the Smurfs for the first time. He puts them in a trance of like I think it's called hypnokinesis is the way that it's translated. And they wake up in this strange land. It's a different place than what they were used to, and they run into these little guys right here. They take them back to the village, and immediately you see that they speak different. Go smell Smurf elsewhere, you Smurfs. It's like they're using the word Smurf as verbs. It kind of gets a little confusing. And what's really cool is that both Johann and Peewit don't really understand them at first, but the more they get to know them, the more that they get to understand them. So Papa Smurf, the leader of the Smurf creatures, decides that, okay, we can't undo the magic that the magic flute has given you, but we can make a new magic flute to counteract that flute. So they start chopping a tree down to make the flute. But unfortunately, Johann and Peewit don't get the flute in time because they wake up from these sacred lands. And that's where they originally appear. So you see, like, Smurf Village, the little place that you're used to with the pretty mushrooms, looks a little bit different. Because they're just out in the middle of this forest where nobody can see them. Anyway, at the end of the story, the Smurfs do appear, and then they leave the flute with them, and then, of course, Peewit wants to keep it, and they end up taking the real flute when he's trying to double-cross them. Then, the popularity of this comic spun out into their own mini-comics. So, over here, the magazine Spirou was the one that was publishing the Johann and Peewit comic, but they did have mini-comics. So, the very first mini-comic that we have is the Black Smurfs, as it's known. Later on, this was called the Purple Smurf, with the same story, where a Smurf gets stung by this little, I think it's the bzzzt fly, and becomes black and has anger issues. And all he's able to say is snap. And it's something that is transferable too. So it's almost like a zombie type of disease. Now, of course, when they brought over the cartoon to America in the early 80s, whenever they wanted to do this adaptation, they were like, look, we have, little kids that will see this Black Smurf and be like, hey, that looks like me. Why does he have anger issues? So later on, it became the Purple Smurf, which is also collected in this book. So that's really cool. So these were original little mini comics in the way they appeared here. all the way through the end. And then you get a little bit about the introduction of the War of the Seven Springs here. And they tell you even what changed from the original comic book to the adaptation. And this story right here is all about this ghost that is haunting this castle once a month. And the ghost reveals that he is cursed because of his drunken ways, and that's something that you'll notice is different than the way it was adapted in the cartoon, of course, in the early 80s. Now, he reveals what ends up happening, how he got drunk, and then got the entire town drunk by changing the water into alcohol, including all the animals, and how he needs to be restored. So both Johann and Pee-wee go on a journey to try to help him find this witch, to get him back, because they need something from him. And they end up like running into different characters. One of the characters I remember them running into is this character named Panduro, which is my mother's maiden name, and the literal translation is hard bread. So I wonder if that's a play on words. But anyway, they end up running into Rachel, and Rachel may have ties to the Smurfs, perhaps, when they find a flute there. And sure enough, here comes Papa Smurf. Now, the Smurfs in this story, even though this is their second big comic appearance, and they appeared in, again, the mini comic, and then the first appearance, don't have a lot of pages in here. So once this story is over is when we get to the Smurf Napper. And the Smurf Napper is none other than our introduction to Papa Smurf, Gargamel. Now, Gargamel is, of course, their arch nemesis along with his cat Azrael. And I remember reading this, but then I thought, wait a second, this looks different. I remember this being a mini comic, and it's not. Later on, Peyo redid this with his studio to make it into an actual comic, like you have here in the anthology collection. So this story here of the Smurf Napper, right here, will later on become this. Now, I think that will be in volume 2, so we'll have to wait on that, but I was like, this is all familiar. There's the egg and the Smurf right here. So it's all these little stories. You're introduced to this reclusive sorcerer named Gargamel who wants to create this like philosopher's stone that turns metal into gold. That's the story of Gargamel, and then, of course, Azrael. Then you get the whole Smurf and the Egg storyline, or the Egg and the Smurf, sorry. And this is an annual event known as Smurf Day, and Papa Smurf suggests that they make a big cake to celebrate, and that's where the egg comes from. Again, these are all mini-comics, right? These originally appeared as mini-comics in the Spirou magazine. This is the fake Smurf, where I think it's supposed to be Vanity. I know that this was adapted into a cartoon. They make a clone of him. And then we've got the Hunger of the Smurfs in here. So little mini-comics is what you're going to be getting until they get so popular that 100 Smurf is awesome, because there's this whole story about how Papa Smurf raised all of these 99 Smurfs, so maybe they need another Smurf. And that's where, oh no, this is the one with Vanity Smurf right here, like the clone of Vanity, if you will. And then a little bit more about Johann and Pee-wee right here, and the Cursed Land. Now, the Cursed Land was turned into a movie as well. This is the one that I remember my dad taking me to when I was big into Los Pitufos in Peru, and I had no idea that who these two characters were. I was like, who the heck are these guys that are in my Smurf cartoon? I didn't ask for this, but in this story, one of the Smurfs will play a big part. It's no longer playing just like these kind of to help your story move forward type of characters. It's now, no, we're going on this journey with you guys, and that's what this is. It's a really cool story that has a lot of fantasy elements in here that, if you read the introduction, it predates Tolkien, like, or at least what Peyo would have read from Tolkien. And there's a lot of elements, including the dragon, that are very similar to the Tolkien-like stories, with a lot of the fantasy and medieval elements, of course, thrown in. And then for the first time, we get the Flying Smurf. So this is the very first Smurf full-blown comic. It's no longer a mini-comic. They have evolved. Now you're going to start seeing characters that you may be familiar with in the cartoon. Brainy's in here. I can't remember, in the previous volume, he wasn't wearing glasses. This is all about a Smurf trying to fly. And then you get the purple Smurfs. Remember how I was talking about the black Smurf, and then I was like, oh, later on, when it was a full-blown comic, they redid it, and they remade it, changing the color to the purple Smurf. Now, in this version, I want to say Brainy is wearing... Yeah, Brainy is wearing glasses, whereas in the original version, there's no glasses on Brainy. Character evolution. And honestly, speaking of evolution, it's really cool to see Peyo's artwork just evolve. Just getting more and more comfortable with these little characters, you know, going from this tiny, pointy little hats at the beginning, or at least it look like they have a little pointy end right there, looking more like Walt Disney type of dwarves, and just being more comfortable with the characters that we've grown and loved. But yes, this is the Purple Smurf story collected again, and it's really cool to have all those little mini comics. Nothing in the back, and here are your end sheets. Now, let's look at the binding of this book. 304 pages. It is sewn binding and printed in this really thick, glossy paper stock. And this is a book, by the way, for all ages. Like, it's anybody from kids to adults can read it. I have a fun time reading these stories. And the paper stock they're using here is thicker than the paper stock if you have the anthology series. Like, it's different than this paper stock here. So the big difference right now is that this is actually printed in publishing order, from their first appearance to their second appearance in the mini comics to their next appearance in Johann and Peewit. And then, of course, all the little mini comics appearances until they get to the big story right here. That by that point, I think Peyo is just like, okay, you know what? Let's just give them their own full-blown comic. And yeah, in the Cursed Land, and then you get these stories. Whereas over here in the anthology, which we'll do a little comparison to the art, because paper stock in here isn't as thick. The actual first appearance of the Smurfs don't happen until the ending of the book. And also, they don't translate the title, which I find interesting. They do that with all of these, like the right here, which I thought was really cool, but they do translate all of the titles here, as you can see. You know, they actually get to the Purple Smurf. So actually, let's do this. Let's do a comparison here with this. So again, the paper stock is thicker. And the eye, there's not much of an eye, but I will say that... Oh, it's on the opposite side now. That it is... It's not 100% necessary because there's not like a lot of spread pages. But this is the artwork right here and just how much bigger it is in this format. You still have your white frames, of course, which were here too. But the artwork is bigger. Let's get to this page right here with Brainy and Papa Smurf. Translation is the same. Colors looking identical. Maybe just a little bit more vibrant over here in this edition than over here. Just a little faded out yellow right there. But this is the original printing. This is the one I've had since I think it came out in 2014. I know it was after my daughter was born, because I've always wanted to read the comics and I never had a chance. And of course, these have been also available in digest-sized books and hardcovers, like individual albums. But it is finally here in a big edition with 2 more solicited so far this year, and hopefully more on the way. Because I do want to see the stuff after Peyo passed away, like the stuff his son in the studio still continued doing. But let's do just one more page right here. And there is actually, yes, this introduction right here, the Purple Smurfs, is right before, yeah, they even have this introduction. However, it is updated a little bit. Right here, when talking about Jim Salicrup, they talk about how then Smurf-in-Chief Jim Salicrup, whereas over here, it is Smurf-in-Chief Jim Salicrup, who was the editor, of course, of Papercutz, and guy that used to work at Marvel Comics. But that is it. That is the Smurf Archives Volume 1. That, as they say, is that. If you're interested in purchasing this Archives edition, don't forget to check out our sponsor, cheapgraphicnovels.com, your online home for graphic novels and collected editions up to 50% off cover price. They have excellent shipping and prompt and helpful service. Check out their bargain deals for up to 90% off cover price. And don't forget, the CGN also takes pre-orders. That way you don't miss out on the hottest releases. And they are currently running a special promotion for you Minties. If you're a first-time customer, after receiving your order confirmation email, reply back to that email and let them know Near Mint Condition sent you their way. They will then apply a free shipping promotional credit to your next order in the US. Cheap Graphic Novels, your source for the hottest books with the kind of deep discount, quality shipping, and customer service that will keep you coming back for more. And that was the content, the page count, and build, and of course the quick comparison to the anthology series. In the comments down below, let me know if you've never read Smurfs, you just remember the cartoon, or even, oh my gosh, it feels so old asking this, or even just the movies that came out in 2011 and you have no idea what the cartoons are. Or if you've read it and you got the anthology, you've got the small digest sized books and you've been waiting for this big edition. I would love to know all those comments down below. Don't forget to smash that like button on the way out. Everyone stay healthy and safe out there. Much love.